This is a Going Back, Remembering UGA interview with Dr. Henry King Stanford, conducted by Fran on June 28, 2006. Today we are visiting with Dr. Stanford at home at Magnolia Manor in Americus, Georgia. Thank you for talking with us today, Dr. Stanford.
I'm very happy to do it.
Such a rich and full life. Why don't we begin in the beginning? Tell us a little bit about your birthplace.
It has been an extraordinary life.
It has been. Tell us about your birthplace and your family and your early years.
I was born in Atlanta and had a marvelous education at Atlanta's public schools. It was in the old K633 plan, kindergarten, 6 years in elementary school, 3 years junior high, 3 years in high school. I graduated from Old Boys High in Atlanta. By the time I graduated from high school, I'd had 4.5 years of Latin, 3 years of French, and I was always eager to learn languages. And I got out to Emory University, and the professor said, as I was registering as a freshman, "Oh, well, see now, you've had too much French to take French as your freshman year. You'll have to stop." I said, "Well, put me in sophomore class." He said, "No, we have another rule. No freshman take a sophomore course." "Well, I'll take it when I get to be a sophomore." "Oh, but still another rule. No freshman is permitted to take a sophomore labeled course." So he put me in German, and I fell in love with the language, but I always had a penchant for languages. I would have fallen in love with Urdu or Swahili or whatever he put me into. But that's how I majored in German and history, thinking I was going to the United States Foreign Service.
And that had, the love of language was a great influence.
It was from the beginning. And I did go to the Foreign Service because I was 20 years old when I graduated from Emory University. You had to be 21. And so the professor said, my German professor, we'll get you a fellowship at the University of Heidelberg. You start there and take the exam when you come back. So I got over to Germany in the fall of 1936, and Hitler celebrated his 4th anniversary in power when I was there. I'll never forget the woman, the maid, taking me up to my room in the German dormitory. She said, I said to her, I was talking German to her, how do you like your country? She was very happy. She said, yes, we all love Hitler. I said, really? She said, yes, he got our land back for us. She's talking about the province, the provincial provinces up and down the Rhine River were not supposed to have any German troops in them. And Hitler decided to, in contrary to the Treaty of Versailles, send some troops in. And that just won the German people over that they could have troops in their own land. That's what she meant by have her land back.
And he started moving then, and he didn't quit, did he?
And the Germans were still living there, but they were just not shown as German. And then it was the time when Hitler had, every professor I had raised their arm and said, "Hi, Hitler," before every lecture.
How did that affect your goals in life and your idea of the world?
Well, there were always two Germanys in my mind, and one was the German of Hitler, Goering, Goebbels, Hess. The other was a German of Heine, Goethe, so on, the great German literary and musical figures. And so I didn't get mixed up.
Let's go back, Dr. Stanford. Tell me a little bit about your family in your growing up years.
I was born in Atlanta and was the oldest child, eventually child of 3, and had a great education, as I've said, going to the Atlanta public schools. It was just wonderful.
After you returned from Germany, you went back for a master's at Emory, is that correct?
Not right then. I Emory University invited me to teach at a junior college. Emory ran for 25 years in Valdosta, Georgia. And I went down to teach German and French, and was there for 2 years. Then came up to the Atlanta campus and won a master's degree, and was on leave to go back to Valdosta, but I was invited to take a position at Georgia Tech. And I taught international studies at Georgia Tech for a year.
We're not going to hold that against you.
What's that?
We're not going to hold that against you.
No, I hope not.
Well, now, where did Miss Stanford, when did Ruth King Stanford come into the picture?
She was born in Atlanta, as I was, graduated from the comparable high school to boys' high school, Girls' High, and we met at the St. Martin Methodist Church, and she was really a great companion, as well as a wife.
And how many years were you all married?
65 years and 6 months. When she married on March 30, when she died on March 31st, 2002, we were married 65 years and 6 months.
What a wonderful record. That almost matches your record of 5 institutions of higher education of which you were.
That's right. And Ruth, somebody asked her what she'd done with her life when we retired came back to American University of Georgia. She said, I've been the unpaid first lady on 5 different campuses.
That's right. Let's talk a little bit about those 5 different institutions. You had an opportunity, and I believe you began right here in Americus at Georgia Southwestern College.
Georgia Southwestern. In 1948, I was 31 when I was given the job, 32 when I took office. I took the job in America without ever seeing the campus. This was the days before faculty participation, advertisement. The chancellor had taught me Bible at Emory University when he was a professor. The assistant chancellor, the vice chancellor, had been dean at Emory Junior College in Valdosta where I started teaching, so that's how...
They knew you already and knew you'd make a great candidate for the job, right?
Yes, I just enjoyed it immensely.
Well, now, Georgia Southwestern was a junior college at the time? Was it just
yes,
it was a 2 years?
2 years, junior college. And I had a wonderful experience here. We loved it so much, that's why we came back here. When I retired from the University of Miami, we were able to secure an old house that Ruth loved of a Southern primitive. She had a lot of Southern primitive furniture, and she put me and all the Southern primitives in the house. And we looked pretty good in that house.
We passed that house on the way down Lee Street. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful, isn't it?
It's beautiful.
It was taken apart, moved down from north of here, from Oglethorpe, and put back together here in America.
Peg by peg and board by board, I
guess.
Yes. Talk to us a little bit about after that. Did you go to Milledgeville right after that, or was there the GSCW at the time? Was
no, well, let's see. I was, as I say, I was president at Georgia. But let's see, I became president at Milledgeville when I was serving in Atlanta as assistant chancellor. I'd been moved from Georgia Southwestern presidency to assistant chancellor in Atlanta. And one morning I got in on time, but the regents already had a meeting, and I'd not been invited as assistant chancellor. And I was surprised and really pretty much upset. And a few minutes, Harmon Caldwell, was chancellor, came down to the office and said, Henry, the chairman of the board would like to meet you. And I went down to Robert Arnold, textile tycoon, from down toward Covington. Said, Henry, the regents would like for you to be president of Georgia State College for Women in Millersville. I said, Mr. Arnold, how do you know I believe in a state-supported women's college? He said, hell, you can change your mind, can't you? And so I became president of old GSCW, and I've been there 1 year. We had several empty residence halls, and the other institutions of the system, and like Carrollton and other places, had with taking students that we were not permitted to take. In other words, the boys. And I came back to the Regents. I said, listen, this is just not working. You've got to change this to graduate institution. Oh, and Mr. Robert Arnold then, the chairman, hit the table with his fist and said, Henry, you don't get it. Get what? We must maintain one institutional culture and refinement for the young women of this state, where they can eat dinner on white tablecloths with white napkins. His idea of preserving Southern womanhood. It wasn't mine. And I left.
And what came next?
You see, that was just it. Then I went to Turkey for a year, and then came back. But it was a great, great year in our lives to be out there, and it was just a wonderful experience to learn the Turkish language. It was an agglutinating language. I thought the only things that agglutinated were chimney swifts, who took their saliva and stuck straw inside the chimney to make a nest. Well, the Turkish language, the Finnish language, the Hungarian language are agglutinating languages because they add things on the end. They have the prepositions only postpositions. And it's hard to imagine, but that's what the language is like, and I just loved it. And we enjoyed going to Turkey. I took my whole family out there. In my year in the State Department, New York University, I got my doctorate in the State Department, paid my expenses to go to Turkey, direct a program for a year. And that was my great experience with agglutinating language. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience for the family and educational too. So NYU in the State Department paid the expenses of my family to go with me.
You probably have a interesting perspective on the current situation that we have with those folks in the Muslim world then, the Muslims. From your time in Turkey, there are Muslims in Turkey, right? I'm not wrong.
Yes. Well, my it was a thrilling experience for me to have some chance to learn and use the Turkish language. As I said, my first time I'd ever had experience with agglutinating language. I used to have to get the dictionary to see what a young boy was calling me. He was playing out on the streets with Turkish kids, and I corrected one night at the dinner table. He looked at me and said, "Alçak." I said, "Bir dakika, one moment." I went to get the dictionary, opened it up and found, "Alçak, one who is low or debased." I said, "That's not a pretty thing to call your father. You ought to be ashamed of it." And all his older children started laughing at him, looked at them and said, "Alçaklar," put it in the plural. And never had any grammar lessons, but it was the plural. I told the faculty members the next day at the university where I was working what he'd called me. He said, "Who called you that?" I said, "My young son." "Well, is that bad?" He said, "Yes, terrible. That's what one taxi driver calls another one when he loses a cab passenger to him."
So you broadened your children's horizons too. Huh?
Yeah.
They learned the bad Turkish words. Then you returned home, Dr. Stanford, and I know you went to the next institution, right? You went to Birmingham Southern next?
Yeah, yes, I went to Birmingham Southern, and a great, great experience in my life. In the beginnings of desegregation, and in Birmingham, the chief of police was the meanest man I ever knew, Bull Connor. He arrested one of my students, a 5-year Kappa, pre-ministerial student on a charge of vagrancy, when he was leaving the Methodist Church one Sunday morning where he was assistant pastor. I just couldn't believe it. He was in jail, and I called Bull Connor. I said, "You've arrested my student, I want him released." "Well, you can't release him unless there's a fine paid." I said, "But you know, he's a great student. He wasn't doing anything. He just joined some black students to protest segregation at a lunch counter in downtown Birmingham." He said, "Dr. Stanford, I think I've heard enough. You run the university and I'll run the city." Bull Connor.
And those were interesting years in Alabama, were they not?
Yes, very, very.
I understand they were a life lesson to you when you got to Miami, when you saw some other demonstrations. Is that right?
Yes, it was a great experience. Miami was coming out of a reputation that had been slapped upon it by those who wanted to detract from it. Suntan U. And one of my first jobs there was to try to overcome this appellation. And it was a great experience, and we moved it forward, and was rewarded before I left with Chapter Phi Beta Kappa. And so it was good. Then it came up, I thought 4 institutions were all that I'd had. And then Georgia came into the scene later.
Right. You had retired?
Yes.
Come back to Americas?
He came back to Americas, and there was a regent from Americas named Dr. Bud Robinson. And those were the days when the Jan Kemp business had taken over. I was Jan Kemp was very, very critical of the institution, and they decided not to reappoint her. And that's when she took a case to an Atlanta, Georgia court, got not only the job back, but a lot of money. And the president at Georgia filed his resignation, and it was accepted. And what are we going to do? It's too late to go through all the processes. We have to get a temporary president. Whom are we going to get? And that's when Dr. Bud Robinson was a fellow down in the Americas. Do about as good a job as we can get done this time. So my wife dropped me down at the bus station, and Rudy Hayes, who was the editor of the local paper, called to speak to me, and Ruth said, "I just dropped at the bus station." She said, "Where?" He said, "Bus station." Well, he came to the bus with a cameraman and got a picture of me getting on the bus. And when I got to Atlanta, there were 4 reporters and 4 cameras getting a picture of me getting off the bus.
They knew what was going on.
The first question that I got from the Puerto Rican, "Dr. Stanford, don't you think it unusual for a man of your reputation to get on the bus?" I said, "Well, wait a minute, let me explain. My wife and I have just one car between us. She had a beauty parlor appointment this morning. First things first."
Had your priorities in the right place.
Yes.
What did you, so you were called, basically, called in the old ministerial way.
That's right.
To become the interim president of the University of Georgia at that time.
I loved it. It was a tremendous experience, and in all my long career that started, as I said, as president of Georgia Southwest in 1948, did I feel as needed or as appreciated the year I was in Athens. It was just a great year for me.
What was the atmosphere on the campus when you arrived?
Well, there was uncertainty, some anger too. Jan Kemp had filed a suit, and won the suit and got not only Jack back, but a lot of money, not her job back, but a lot of money. And the president held up a reappointment until he could investigate, and the regents did not like that, so they gave him a temporary appointment, and he didn't like that, and he resigned. And that's when I went over. And,
so the morale was a little bit low. People were confused.
That's right. And they wanted me to go over, and the chancellor did, live in the Holiday Inn there and overlap my predecessor. Well, he wasn't overlappable. I didn't talk with him at all when I was there, but I did have a great experience with Steve sitting over there, Peter Shedd. He was an administrative assistant. Just a wonderful experience. And I've felt in that long time, I never felt as needed or as appreciated as I was at the University of Georgia. People were so upset about what was going on, and I just forget this, let's look at it. And I talked everywhere, all over the state, about the quality that we had at the University of Georgia in education and development of students.
There's a great quote that you said you were a self-appointed evangelist who, like Paul, fetched the gospel from Athens to Rome, Georgia. That's a great quote, and that's what you did there.
Yeah, everywhere, just all over the state. I just enjoyed speaking about the strength of the University of Georgia, and it was just a great thrilling experience to represent the university at that time in its history.
Well, you came at a wonderful time, and a direct quote that we have on tape from Louise McBee is that you were the great healer. You were the great healer that brought us back.
I appreciate that so much. I think that's a wonderful term, and I hope I merit it.
Tell us, that was 1987, 86 and 87.
86, 87, I was over there.
And you were interim president, but you were pretty quickly named president emeritus because you made such a terrific difference at the University of Georgia.
Yes.
And your job didn't end then. Weren't you appointed to some other committees? Didn't you continue
I was retired, but it was a compliment to be called president emeritus after just 1 year over there. As I've just said, I never felt as needed or as appreciated in my life as I did that year in Athens.
And then one of the great adventures of your life began while you were at the university, the process, and that was your Mount Everest trip, right?
Yes, I was sitting in my desk one day, and the assistant at the outer office called and said, Dr. Stanford, there's a young man here who wants you to help him climb Mount Everest. I said, well, tell him to go somewhere else. I don't know anything about mountain climbing. She called back and said, he's such a sincere and well-meaning young fellow, I think you should talk to him. I said, well, send him in. And said, Dr. Stanford is Joseph Denon. His father was a professor at the University of Georgia. And he said, Dr. Stanford, we want you to help us climb Mount Everest. I said, I hope you know that I know nothing about mountain climbing, that it's just not worth your time to talk to me, as I don't know anything about it. Well, Dr. Stanford, let me talk, please. I said, well, what do you have to say? He said, we're planning to try to climb Mount Everest from the eastern side, from Tibet on up, and we want you to help us climb it. I said, how? I don't know. As I told you, I didn't know anything about mountain climbing. He said, you ought to listen. We want you to write the Chinese Consul in New Orleans for a visa, and Chinese Mountaineer Association in Beijing for a permit. And Fukadam said, we're thinking of taking some trekkers with us to the base camp. Gosh, the view changed all of a sudden. So I got them the visa and the permit, and they invited me to go.
Tell us a little bit about your trip. It took a while to get there, didn't it?
It was a great, great experience. I just stayed with them up to about 18,000 feet as a group. And as I've like to say many times, that's where the men were separated from the boys. I came with the boys and came home. The next 5,000 feet had to be scaled at angles of 60 and 90 degrees. And it was a great, great experience.
How long were you up on the mountain, though, at the base camp?
Well, I was up there about 2 weeks.
And it took...
But I didn't stay there. I just stayed maybe one or two nights at the camp, then came back. At that further, as I say, the next 5,000 feet had to be scaled at angles of 69 degrees, practically straight up. And that's when, as I like to say, the men were separated from the boys. I came with the boys and came home.
On your party, Dr. Louise McBee was with you.
She was.
And some other faculty, is that correct, I believe? Other faculty members also?
I'm trying to think of that and remember who they were, but Louise McBee was along, yes. And she's a great lady.
And you all went through an earthquake during the course?
Yes, an earthquake. While we were up there, it rolled me over in the tent.
I read an article about you in Harper's in which you were called that rare phenomenon, a popular college president. And this was when you were at Birmingham Southern. And Dr. Stanford, in all the conversations that I've had about you, that comes through always. What do you think it is about your view of life that helps you connect with...
I just love people. I've always loved people. And students were people. And it upset some of my trustees at the University of Miami. They looked upon, some of the trustees did, not all of them, unfortunately, looked upon the university president as you looked upon a corporate president. You sit back in the office, plan, strategize, delegate, and then you depend upon those to whom you've delegated authority to run the place. But in Miami, when I put on shorts and a red, I guess it was a jacket of some color, I've forgotten, and ran from the administration building to the student center to open all sports week, it got several of my trustees very upset. They couldn't believe that the president of the university would act that way. I just should not have exposed myself that way. They said that was unpresidential. But I loved the students. And
well, and they loved you.
I just had a great time with them.
And I want to ask you about one of your students. Talk a little bit about Ray Bellamy.
Ray Bellamy was my first black football player at the University of Miami. When I got to Miami as president, the football coach came in to express his greetings and said, Dr. Stanford, I just want to welcome you and hope you have a very excellent and enjoyable career here. And then he walked back, and with his hand on the doorknob, he turned and said, anything I do for you, Dr. Stanford? He said, yes. I said, yes, recruit a black football player. That doorknob turned into molten metal. He walked over to the desk, looked down at me and said, I said, you don't understand. I said, understand what? If we recruit a black football player, LSU will cancel a contract with us. I said, who's making policy at the University of Miami, me or LSU? And he turned around and walked out. He didn't. The next coach, Charlie Tate, recruited Ray Bellamy, who was the first black football player whose parents were working in the agricultural fields over on the southwest Florida Peninsula. And I got to know Ray very well. And I think, and he is now, became director of student life at Fort Valley State University. I think he's just taken a new job at Tallahassee in the University of Florida State University down in Tallahassee. So that was Ray Bellamy.
And you all are good friends to this day, aren't you?
Yes, he stops by to see me. I remember he was the only black player on the field when the University of Miami played Georgia Tech. We were in Grant Field, Georgia Tech's arena. And Ray, as I say, was the only black fellow on the football field. And he was tackled every play, no matter whether he had the ball or not. But as I said, I've kept up with him through the years. How old? I got up 18,000 feet on the east face of Mount Everest in 1988 when I was only 72.
Just a boy. You were a boy. Dr. Stanford, when I look at your resume, and I had your resume, what a wonderful, full, rich life. What for you, it's crazy maybe even to ask this question, but a high point, 2 or 3 high points in your life, what would they be?
There have been so many high points, but as I've said a few minutes ago, I never felt as needed or as appreciated as it was that year in Georgia. But I loved living around New York City. I took a job in Rockefeller Center, so I'd be able to always write a PhD degree down at Washington Square where New York University was located. And that was a great experience, living in New York, around it. I lived on the up part of New York City, then came back to Georgia, brought my wife and 2 children up there. We lived in Ossining. And then they were renting the house. The fellow had to have his house back, so he came back, and then I had to move, and we bought a house at Lynbrook on Long Island. And that was, as I say, a very enjoyable experience living around New York City. And I think my wife enjoyed it very much too.
We're glad to know that being at the University of Georgia was one of the high points. We're going to keep that one in the tape, okay?
Yes, please.
How many languages do you speak?
German, I suppose, is my second mother tongue. I read some German every day. As I say, the greatest influence in my life has been Goethe's Faust, contract between Faust and Mephistopheles the devil. Mephistopheles comes to Faust and says, I'll make you into a young man again, fall over again, romantic lover, and do anything you want done, provided you'll be my servant in the next world. I'll be your servant in this world. And Faust looks at him and says, all right. And I still remember the German today. Ich habe ein Faulbett liegen, so sei es gleich für mich getan. Kannst du mich schmeicheln, je belügen, dass ich mir selbst gefallen mag. Kannst du mich mit Genuss betrügen, das sei für mich der erste Tag. ich zum Augenblick sagen, verwahre doch, du bist so schön, dann möchte ich mich in Fesseln schlagen. All that German adds up to, I'll be your servant in the next world, he tells the devil, whenever I stop striving. And I read that as a college student, and it's been the greatest influence in my life to keep striving, keep striving. And that's the only reason that the devil would take over Faust whenever he stopped striving. In that last part of the German accord, if ever I say to one moment, you're so beautiful, I want to hold on to you, I'm lost. Because that means if I want to hold on to this one, I'm not striving for the next one. So that's the greatest experience, literary experience in my life, as good as Faust.
I think that's a great way to close this off. Do y'all? Anything else, you all? I think we're through, Dr. Stanford, unless you have anything you'd like to add.
My wife would say, Henry likes to talk so much he can turn one appearance into what did she say? Turn one appearance into, or he can turn one sentence into a sermon.
Well, you did a great job today.
Well, thank you.
We just thank you for letting us come and visit with you.